Hello, folks. Welcome to Dojo Talks. Today we are talking the latest chess Olympiad that just finished literally 2 days ago or yesterday in Chennai. I got confused because I was following it like live, and for me, it like the last round started uh, actually on the same day as the penultimate round because it was 5 hours earlier. So the penultimate round for me started 2:30 a.m. Pacific time. I think Sunday or Monday morning, and then the final round started like 9:30 p.m. That's it. So I don't know when it finished, but it was very very exciting to follow. And there's a lot of interesting stories from the Olympiad, and we'll be discussing many of them today. First, let me throw it to you guys. David, how much were you following the event, and how much did you enjoy it this time around?
I was following it, but not live because it was the middle of the night for me. So how much I was following it was when I would get up every day, I would check all the results and all the games of all the players that I'm interested in, which includes basically all players over 2,700 and all juniors participating in it. And I mean, because they were on the top boards, it was natural to follow them. But there are a couple teams that I tend to root for in these events. Two of them are Uzbekistan and Armenia, so it was like obvious to check their games. If they'd been further down in the standings, I would have been checking their games too. Um, I checked Norway's games up to a point, and then that's another team that I'm a fan of. And then I couldn't, I couldn't check anymore because things were going so badly for them. So yeah, that was my followage.
Yeah, they dropped off a bit. How about you, Jesse?
It was a depressing event for me. So it got to a certain point, the level of pain was so hard as a fan that it became hard to watch. And then there was like a decision made of like, should I continue watching the carnage or do maiden twos? And there were some days the maiden twos won, my friend, because it was so bad. It was so bad for both. I root for the US team and they were like a super team, and we'll talk about that. But honestly, it was like Bobby's collapse, which we'll also talk about, that really killed me. There was a couple other people who collapsed we'll also talk about, but that was, as a fan, it became hard to watch.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
were saying as a fan of the U.S. team, yeah, um, absolutely. I mean, I feel like our women didn't do so bad, but of course, I'm always rooting for them to medal. So anything short of that is going to be disappointing. And then the U.S. Open team, of course, as we'll talk about, were huge favorites.
Yeah.
So not sure where you guys want to start here, but I feel
I
like,
know.
oh,
I've
where do you
I've
want
got a
to
good place to start. We talked a whole list of some like really cool questions and thoughts that came up while watching the Olympiad. But straight off the bat, I think chat had a better question than any of our questions. So I think we should like transition straight into this, which is chat asking how do we sort of choose which teams we're rooting for? Like, why am I rooting for Uzbekistan? Why is Jesse rooting for the U.S. team? Like, so can you each say, is there more than one team you root for, and why do you root for that team?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I like the U.S. team. I typically root for the U.S. team, but there are other teams that I'm fond of as well, like Ukraine, of course, being my home country, and obviously their recent troubles, made me want to root for them. Made me very happy for the Ukrainian women's team that they won their section. That was awesome. Um, yeah, I don't know if I have like a ton of favorite teams. I just kind of, I don't know. I like a lot of different players, and I like it when people uh, do well. I'm a shameless bandwagoner. So when
Yeah.
someone like Gukesh is doing well, I'm like, great. I hope he just like continues to crush it, right? Or if it was Nihal,
Right.
that ended up. I mean, he did have a great event, but if he ended up having like the 9 out of 9, I'd have been like, yeah, go Nihal. Like, that's awesome. So yeah, I just like it when players have like great performances and do amazing things. I thought what Sergisian did on board one for Armenia was amazing. Going into the event, I wasn't thinking about Armenia that much, but then as they were doing well, I was like, oh my god, yeah, they're playing without their superstar for many years, and they're still doing amazing, which to me was just like absolutely incredible. Much more surprising than the uh, Uzbek performance, because I feel like, okay, those kids, yeah, they're the future. They're gonna take over.
So when
Yeah.
Gukesh has a performance like this, does that mean that you would like root for him next time? Like once somebody's made this impression on you and sort of grabbed you as a fan, can they take you with them to the
I
next
mean,
event?
yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm definitely rooting for like all the Indian kids, because I'm definitely a
Mhm.
fan of like Gukesh and Nihal and Prague, and Eric Icy, I think, deserves an apology from me, because like I didn't even know about him until he was like winning Waikanze. It's just like, oh my god, like what is happening? Um,
Yeah.
and there are other kids as well. I remember there was this kid Arvind who was also super strong coming out of India, but I
Mm-hmm.
think he dropped off a bit.
Chitambaram.
Yeah, but he was also
Yeah.
another Ramesh kid. Okay, I'm pretty sure he got to like 2600, so
Yeah.
still quite amazing. But yeah. So for me, I don't know. I like the juniors. I like the underdogs. But I also like the U.S. team, of course. For that.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jesse?
Well, first of all, it's always, as a fan, whether it's chess or something else, it's always kind of an emotional experience. And what's funny about the US team is that for most of my life, the US team were stark underdogs, just incredible underdogs, and they really didn't have a chance. There was a couple times they did really well back in the day, but it was not because that they were on par with the Soviets or the Russians or the Ukrainians or anybody else, through that whole period of years. Now, all of a sudden, they are the strongest team on paper with Aronian coming over.
Mm-hmm.
Aronian, we got to put in perspective, the Armenian team won the Olympiad in amazing fashion. The streets of Yerevan with Aronian, all these plaudits and everything, the whole country celebrating, all of a sudden he's on our team and it feels like, oh, we should win this thing now. Now it's like this really, to put it in perspective, in historical perspective, imagine it this way: World Cup is coming up in soccer. The US team has always been terrible. Let's say around 20th in the world, something like that. And that's the way it was for our chess team for most of time. Not 20th, but still not really up with the high contenders. Imagine suddenly, as a fan, you're rooting as a fan of an underdog for all your life. And then all of a sudden, imagine the US team were somehow at the top of world soccer. It would be unbelievable. But you would still be rooting for them because there's like memory of like, oh no, they were once this incredible underdog team. And of course, I know that people on them have studied their games, so that creates an emotional bond. And for me, even more than the team, like it was just soul crushing. To see Fabi fall from grace, man. I mean, and maybe we're witnessing it right now. We'll talk about that in a second. But anyways,
Yeah.
the question was, how do you get these fan relationships? And maybe the only difference between something I know very little about, like soccer and chess, is just when I've studied a person's games, I feel like I know them better. I know where they're coming from. And because I'm an old guy, I'm against the kids. You got to be against the kids. And I haven't been studying Gukesh's games for all my life. No, I've only heard that kid's name in the last couple of years, so come on.
Well, this event was tough for you because I think overall the kids pretty much racked up a score.
No, the kids
We'll
crushed
talk
it.
more about that later.
Yeah.
First, I'll agree with you on something. The more you study someone, the more you root for them in the future. I totally agree with that, But so I think what happens with me often is like I sort of find out about some new prodigy and then I'll sort of follow their games forever, So eventually they won't be a prodigy. They'll just be like a super GM, but I'll still be a fan of theirs because I've been watching their games since they were young. Like, for example, Fallujah, I started watching his games when he was just turning 12, approximately, and he was playing the Benoni in the Iranian closed championships. And I was like, wait, there's a 12-year-old in a national championship? And he's playing the Benoni against some GMs rated 200 points higher than him and sort of scoring some points, So then I follow him, right? And now, of course, he's super high rated. But, when he's 30 years old, I'll still be a fan because I've been following him all that time. My fan relationships are many. you know, I'm in love with a million chess players. Um, but there's a few different ways that they crop up. One is somebody just plays in a style I like, like if you want me to be your fan, go beat a GM with the King's Gambit, sack a few pieces, and then I'll follow your boring Rui Lopez games in the future. uh, and another way is when there's like a collection of players in one area that kind of emerge together. That always like grabs me, when there's some sort of peers, some little group, and you like wonder like what's bubbling there, how are they all getting it together, So I was really excited about the Iranian national team at some point when I realized that they had like 4 players under 16, 17 who are really good. It was like, well, at the Olympiad, I think they had Gam Magami sort of watching over 4 kids at the Olympiad. And it's like, oh, in 5 years, these kids could just be a team of like all 2700s potentially, or maybe like 1 or 2 will be stuck in the 2600s, but it would be like quite a team. So sort of being able to see that 4 or 5 years in the future. So there was a time a couple of years ago where I was like, ooh, the Uzbek team, ooh, the Iranian team, and that made me a big fan of theirs. So I was really sad to see Fallujah go federation wise. I mean, it may have been by far the best thing for him. Who knows? And I wish him well.
Yeah, on that, it was a shame we couldn't see a fully powered French team with him and like MVL, because they would have just been huge contenders for sure.
Yeah, I mean their third board is at his highest rating of his life and went undefeated on board 1, Jules Moussard.
So, yeah, Moussard, incredibly talented player.
Out of nowhere, a third gun.
Undernoticed, right? Exactly. And they still have like Fressinet and Bacro and all those guys. Yeah, I mean, speaking of, there's a few teams missing from the Olympiad, namely Russia. Although I would argue that the U.S. kind of took Russia's role for this one as being this just like massive underperforming favorite. And then China as well, which won a couple of years ago, and has always had just like an incredibly strong team. So yeah, did that kind of like detract it for you guys, that the Olympiad really wasn't as strong as it could have been? For me, it was a bummer. I mean, that Russia couldn't play. Obviously, I understand why, but I feel like their team is obviously just like insanely strong and deserves to be there.
It was a mild bummer. I would have hoped to see the Russian team there getting beat up like the American team. That would have been great.
Yeah, they would have finished like 4th or 6th, and it would have been fun.
I have a couple teams I root against. I mostly root for people, but sometimes I root against the team while rooting for people on that team. Like, for example, the U.S., I always root against the U.S. team, but I always root for Sam Shankland. Often I root for several people on the U.S. team, like if Jeffrey Sean gets to play, or Sam Sevian, I would root for. But the team as a whole, like I'm hoping that, that they don't do too well. And if Russia had gotten smashed by the Uzbek teenagers, that would have been a day to really enjoy for me. So yeah, it's too bad they weren't there.
Would have been. So let's talk about this U.S. thing, because I saw a lot of people kind of like trashing the U.S. team, especially this time around. I mean, we've been like quote unquote buying players for several years now. With Fabi, like back in like 2016, I think was his first one that he played for us. But this time we had like Dominguez and Ronian as well. Yeah, actually that kind of bummed me out. Like all this talk about like how like the U.S. is just buying all the top stars. I think for a couple of reasons. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about this. We already did a whole episode, actually, people can check out on this topic, but it seemed to come up a lot this time, which was confusing for me. Number one, because the U.S. didn't even do well. It's not like they dominated the event. I would understand if the U.S. like won every match and then it was like it was just not competitive, and then people would be upset like, yeah, they bought all the best players, now they're winning every game. I would be like, yeah, actually that's not fun. But it was very competitive. They were hardly the favorites, going into the last couple rounds. Everyone could tell like the team just wasn't playing as well as the Indians or the Armenians or the Uzbek kids. So that was one thing, is that like, well, like, yeah, they didn't even they didn't even win. Like, like what's the problem? Number two, it's like, I don't know. I think a lot of people are acting like the only thing that happened was that the U.S. team decided they need strong chess players and decided to offer money to all the best players in the world, as if these players like didn't like move to the US already on their own, were already like living in the US in most cases. Like Wesley So is like living here multiple years before switching, as if they didn't have like huge issues with their federation, like with Wesley So having very well documented issues with his federation, with Levon being very unhappy with the Armenian federation. Like, people are acting like the only thing that happened was like someone sent Levon a check for like $1 million and then he moved to the US and like that was it. It was just like a simple
I
like
think he
deal.
may not have even moved, Kostya. He may have just gotten an address here.
No, he lives in St. Louis.
He lives in St. Louis, yeah.
Or Yerevan. Or Yerevan.
I have seen him live here in St. Louis. I can tell you for a fact he yeah does live here. So that was a bummer for me. It's like as if, especially like Aronian, like do people think he's like happy to have like switched from his like home country that he like won so many medals for as like a hero? Like, do people think that was
Not
just
happy now.
like purely like a like just a financial, like, oh, he just wanted some money? Like, it's just very strange. Like, I feel like people are very short-sighted about it. They see like all the strong players on the team and they think these players don't have like their own stories or reasons like why they ended up transferring. Anyway,
I mean,
what
it's a
did you
little
guys
bit
think?
too much of a coincidence, Kostya, to not have something to do with Sinkfield's money.
Well, I'm sure that was a supporting factor, but I mean, we can talk about any of these like specific players. Like, they're all had connections to the U.S. and we're all moving here. So I don't know. I mean,
Sure,
like,
but they all had connections to other countries too. I mean, Levon lived in Germany at some point in his life, right?
yeah, I can't speak to why he chose to the U.S., but it's clearly not as simple as just like, oh, like these players wanted more money and that's it. Like, I don't know. I don't think I've rarely made decisions in my life that were that was just like it was like one factor. I thought about nothing else. I mean, I've fortunately never been in a position where I had to like move countries and switch my whole life.
Yeah.
I feel like the chess team that I play for would be like one of the last things I think about if I have to like uproot my whole life and start living in a new country. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Well, and I want to say something obvious is that if you, I would say, first of all, Caruana is definitely an American player. If you wanted to take out Dominguez and Aronian, and so we would still have an amazing team. If Naka played, and then you had Shanklin, and you got guys like Jeffrey Zhang, we still have a 2,700 plus team. So it's still like it would still be at this. We would still be at the top, even without those guys. So
Right.
is it a little? Honestly, I just want to say, of all the people switching federations, the one we talked about it with Aronian, I still don't entirely. I thought more of the backstory was going to get filled in through time, and I didn't quite feel. I knew there was the thing with the federation, but I didn't quite understand the thing with Dominguez Paris. I mean, get out of Cuba for sure. Get out. It's not just about chess, for that guy. So, there's other reasons to go. And
Yeah.
so it's been here, honestly, forever at this point. He has been here forever.
So beyond that, you guys, I mean, what do you think of the proposition that if the U.S. had brought, Hans Niemann, Jeffrey Xiang, and Sam Sevian, they would have done better than bringing the All-Stars, regardless of how they got the All-Stars onto their team?
Yeah, if anything, people should be happy that the All Stars played rather than the hungry juniors. It's very possible that a team of just like Shanklin, Zhang, Sevian, would have just done better. Of course, knowing what we know now, obviously we don't know. They might have done much worse as well, not having like a lot of experience. But I mean, I don't know. Clearly, the Olympiad showed that these team events, it's not about the sum of the parts. If it was, then Russia would have been winning every single year. No, it's clearly just about how the team does. And well, yeah, we were talking before the show about like, whether 2700s sometimes struggle against 2600s and why that might be. I feel like on paper, 2700s are definitely just going to be better players overall, but it's just like when it comes to this team aspect and there's like all this nervous energy going on and like the games aren't going to be perfect, people are going to make mistakes. I feel like the team aspects, they throw a lot of that stuff kind of into disbalance. And there's also very specific cases where 2700, has to play more for the win because of what's happening with the team situation. And so they're not necessarily like even playing worse or playing like differently than they might play, but their mental psychology is clearly affected because it's not just a one-on-one game anymore. Now they have to think about the rest of the boards and like, maybe I need to keep more winning chances alive in this position.
Mm-hmm. I was I was doing this commentary last week with Lawrence Trent, or I guess maybe just about 2 weeks ago, right before the Olympiad, and he told me he has a theory that the players over 2700 are slightly overrated compared to the players rated around 2600, and that if they played each other a bunch of times, the 2600s would go up in rating a little bit. But the 2700s are often insulated by playing in round robins. And so that was like in my mind as I was watching the results come in, and basically, in the top 30 or 40 players, and this obviously doesn't include Gukesh because he was out of the top 30 players before the tournament, right? Same with Maksudlu or Sargsyan, right? But like, if you look at the players who went into the Olympiad as the top, 30 or so in the world, only Giri gained 4 rating points. Everybody else lost points. So I was wondering, is there some truth to what Lawrence told me?
I think if there is, it's more about the kids, right? Because if you look at who, and this crop of juniors is actually, I want to give a shout out to Chess Numbers on Twitter. He was the one who really has been highlighting for the past year, like the battle of the juniors for the top spot amongst the juniors. And, who was going to be number 2 for a while. Neiman was there. Abdu Tassaro, I can't pronounce the guy's name, but I'm going to try. Abdu Sattarov was there, and Arjun was there, and guys, right? All these guys were there. Then all of a sudden, boom, Gukesh, 16 years old. What? And it just shows how strong this group of kids is right now, which is, I'm going to just segue to our last one. Magnus, if you're listening, buddy, they're coming for you. You might as well play another world championship, dog, because these kids are coming to take it. And then what? You're going to play in the candidates match again just so you can face one of these kids? Oh, my gosh. All right. I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, Magnus is losing ground. Just to put in perspective how young Gukesh is, literally, it'll be 3 years next month that I coached a World Under 12 tournament in China in 2019. So 3 years ago, World Under 12 Championship, Gukesh was the number 1 seed in that tournament at 2450.
All right.
So 3 years ago. Yeah. It's scary. Scary.
But he would have been 13. How was he in an under 12 section?
Well, there's some rules like you have to be, I think, either turning 12 or under 12 like January 1st of the year that you play. So you can turn 12 during the year.
But he would have turned 13 already. No.
Trust him, Mr.
Okay.
He's definitely there. Yeah, I don't know.
All right.
But I mean these junior Keimer also just like super impressive. It's interesting how they all get their chance to kind of surge. Like Prague was surging for a bit. Nihal were surging. Now Gukesh is just like a completely different person now. Noterbeck as well. It's very, very exciting time for chess. I wonder if in a couple of years we're going to see 3 Uzbeks in the top 10. I mean, it'd be like incredible.
That would be insane. So the question of, the 2700s versus the 2600s, I looked through 2700chess.com, right? Because at first it was like clear to me, okay, the 2700 plus group, they basically all lost points, right? So then I tried to look around the 2650, 2660, 2670. Did they all gain points? But what I saw was kind of close to 50-50. Like it wasn't so clear that all the 2600s were gaining points. Then when you click to the junior list on 2700chess.com,
that's right.
That list is green and it's all double digits too. It's like they just destroyed them, So it seems like it's possible that the 2700s losing points could have come just from junior opponents and not from like some advantage of youngsters or youngsters who've already gotten better, but their rating hasn't gotten there yet. And not from random 2600s, so to speak.
Right. And when you look, by the way, at that list, me and Mr. Pruess are looking at the under 21 list.
Yeah.
You look at like, let's say 10, conceivably even 11, 12 names there. It's like the announcement of a new generation. If you think about it, chess fans might even be a little bit bored of these round robins always have the same names. It's clear that the names are now going to change. The names are going to be different names than they were in the past. So if maybe the biggest takeaway, I think there's a couple, but one of the takeaways is, a new generation has announced itself, and we're going to start to be seeing these names that we hadn't even heard of a couple of years ago. And then even some more coming up. Sadwani, you've heard of that kid? I hadn't heard of that kid.
I have.
Yeah, he's been doing really well in like the title Tuesdays for like years
here.
now. Yeah.
Number 14. He's so he is like this huge competitive fight in the under 21s is going to be, and it's just, what does it also say in the big picture? Chess has been getting younger and younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Younger. Yeah.
That's interesting to say that actually on that point. I know Jakob Aagaard he's been posting this thing where actually the average age of the top players has gone up a bit in the last couple of years. It's like 30, 31, and it doesn't really trend down.
Now it will.
Which is interesting. Maybe it will, but we might see these kids we might see them stay at the top well into their 30s. So it's kind of, I don't know. And then there'll be new kids.
No, I mean this topic is tops of the itinerary. So tell us what you think, Kostya. What do you think is this wrong? This impression that the juniors are now better, that chess is favoring more and more younger players?
What was the question? Are the juniors better?
Yeah, so it's basically like, is chess more and more of a young person's game, right? Like, are the juniors doing better because somehow chess favors youth more than it used to, right? Chess has elements of energy versus experience and wisdom and all that, right? So Aagaard apparently showing some kind of trend towards older players doing well. We look at this Olympiad, obviously the youngsters did well in this one tournament.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. It could be a couple of things, like, because we're still kind of coming off of that pandemic, and then last year's World Cup saw a number of like amazing results from juniors that are clearly working very hard. We saw like Sindarov do really well, and like Noterberg and a few others as well. So I feel like a lot of it is just still kind of this kind of afterburn from the pandemic and them doing so much work. I don't know if chess is necessarily getting younger. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, like 10 years ago, I remember there was like Carlsen, Karyakin, Rajabov, they were kind of considered the next generation, and people were saying like, oh, is chess getting younger? It's just kind of, I don't know, it feels like it hasn't changed too much. And you still have guys like Vichy and Gelfand like winning tournaments. So it's not, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's trending downward that much just yet. Like records are being broken, but not like left and right. Like every day there's like a new record that's like smashed or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just put it, whether it's getting younger or not, I think like, to me, optically it is, but just my own basic sense of it is you peak as a player probably between 25 and 28. And how long can you hold on after that? Magnus is 31. How long can you hold on? Caruana, dude, it's not looking good, dude. It's not looking good. He has been crashing. Is that age related? I don't know, but it's clearly a thing where it's really hard to maintain that level. I think not just physically and mentally, but psychologically, to keep that level of performance so high for so long. You just slip a little bit, you're going to lose big time, like Caruana has. He's down to 2757. He was 2800 not so long ago. And the difference between 2757 and 2800 is actually massive. It's a massive difference.
Yeah, I don't know. He's lost a lot of points, but I feel like he's still Caruana. And like, I don't know. I feel like his rating is not gonna matter. Like, unless he's playing Magnus, I think he probably considers himself like a favorite in the game. and I probably would too.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
I think he'll get it back. I think he just needs he just needs a little break from the candidates, right? Just like needs to breathe a little bit, do some meditation. I think 100% he'll be
One
back.
So
thing.
I have perhaps,
Yep.
I'm going to give perhaps a crazy take on this, but I'm going to draw a bunch of these elements together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you that, in my opinion, this one tournament is an aberration from the norm and the trend. So I don't think these juniors are as good as they looked at this tournament. And you guys may know, I'm the one who's a big fan of the juniors. I want to see these Uzbeki kids dominate the world. I want it. And they did dominate, by the way. Like the tournament was actually not close in a certain sense, which we could talk about later if you guys want. But the Uzbekis actually dominated this event, in my opinion, but followed by the India 2 team. But I think that it was an outlier event. I think that that the over 2700s, the older players, all of them, they'll be back on top, in a month at the next event that they play in. I think that, I don't think that Caruana, Aronian, or anybody is over the hill in terms of their performance and their skills yet. I think that the Olympiad's a special situation where you're playing on a team. There's different kinds of like pressure. There's match situations. And also, I think there's perhaps a very important factor, which was the food. I happen to know via an internal contact on the U.S. team that the food was doing some ravaging, and perhaps the older players had a harder time surviving the food situation than the younger players, and that could be an element that meant as they got a few rounds into the tournament, they started struggling a lot.
I could totally sympathize with that. Yeah, like I I got stomach issues. Yeah, if it happens during a tournament, that just messes you up. Actually, it would be a fear for me to play in India because I got a weak stomach. I don't know if I would be able to handle a lot of it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
because food is really good, but yeah, I mean, it's a problem if you can't feel healthy during your game. I mean, yeah, it is just one event. I think there's lots of and there were lots of, I mean, just absolute heartbreak moments that kind of went for the Uzbek team. Like people were mentioning in chat, Shanklin, losing that game to Armenia. I mean, obviously, the U.S. team could have been doing better there, but then there was Gukesh's blunder against Norderbeck, which was just like, so brutal to watch. Just really, really painful.
I mean, from chat, we've got a contact of the Azerbaijan team saying that they resorted to an all candy diet. That was all they were eating just to get their sugar. We've got a contact from the Vietnamese team saying that the Vietnamese team didn't go play because they were so afraid they wouldn't be able to handle the food. So, and I've got someone from the U.S. team telling me that they were definitely struggling with that. So I think that may be a huge element. And so, we see all these Indian juniors surging, but I think they had a massive home court advantage. And although I'm a big fan of them and I would love to say and see, I mean, Jesse wouldn't, but I would love to see, Aragaisi and Gukesh and Abdusadarov ahead of Caruana and shaking up the chess world. I think it was an aberration. And, if Caruana played a match against any of those three players, on American soil next week, he would win.
Actually, it brings up another big topic, which is like people are mentioning, the home, speaking of the home court advantage, the fact that India gets three very strong teams. Obviously, this is a very normal thing for the Olympiad, and the Olympiads that were hosted in Russia saw like three very strong Russian teams, all with like chances for the gold.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, thinking about it this time around, it does kind of feel odd. Like someone made a good point. Realistically, like every country should have one chance for the gold medal, and that's it. It's kind of strange to see a country with like two teams going into the final round with chances for medals. I mean, it's very fun when that happens. Honestly, like
Yeah.
I thought it was cool that India too was doing well, but yeah, it is a little bit kind of odd for the other teams. And yeah, it does make me
Yeah.
think that there should be some kind of like specific, because it sounds like what I heard on the internet is that there's no rule attached to it, but the understanding is that you have your number one team and then you have like a juniors team. It's kind of like a fun team of like wild cards that you like give them a chance to play. So you're not trying to always send your like absolute strongest teams. If you get multiple teams per being the host country. That said, I mean, I'm sure Russia did it, and it does bring up this kind of gray area where okay, you can still have a team full of juniors and they're still a absolute competitor for the top spots. So I don't know. Do you guys feel like that's fair? Like that needs to be changed, or
No, that's been tradition for a long time. That's been a
I
long
know,
time. Yeah.
but it
I don't have
always feels unfair.
no, and honestly, usually the kids don't do so well. That's why it became a story this time. But great. That's a great story.
Yeah.
I'm fine with
I, I'm with Jesse. I'm fine with host countries having an extra team or two. Um, it's exciting for the local fans, and the local fans are important, right? I mean, the Olympiad probably cost a lot of money, and I imagine that the local community put up a lot of that money whether directly or indirectly in some way. I think the state of Tamil Nadu must have like spent a lot of money on this event, so why not give the local people some local kids to cheer for? Yeah.
Well, it does kind of feel like a wild card, like a bot, like having an extra player in the candidates from your country because you're hosting the candidates, which is not a huge problem if the player,
Which has also been done.
which is done, and people have an
Yeah.
issue with that when it's like an extra.
Yeah.
Although here it's kind of funny. People usually want the player to be as strong as possible. They want him to have a real shot.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
it's
would say that's the
essentially
difference immediately between a round robin and a Swiss. If the world championship candidates thing were like a Swiss, no one would complain that there was like an extra Russian player in it
yeah, because there's so many more players.
because it wouldn't be taking somebody else's spot. The Indian team, by having India two, it's not like they said, oh, sorry, Bermuda can't send their team led by Jesse Kraai this year because India gets a second team and that takes their spot away.
One thing I want to say with the youth thing is I really feel like what we're seeing at the top is what I'm observing at the local open tournaments here in the States. Namely, that especially since the pandemic loosened and we're starting to play tournaments again, I go to the top boards and I don't recognize the people. I don't recognize the people. There's all these kids, and I'm like, it used to be I knew everybody. I looked down the list of the top boards and I knew everybody. And now I don't know who these people are. And so it's this interesting, and the old guys, I know the few old guys who come out to play, they're getting smashed. So it's like this changing of the guard thing, which I do think this is like showing it. I do think it's a big watershed moment, and you could look back on it and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, this is where these kids came up, whether it means that kids in general are better or not, I don't know, but it means this generation is different. And you're seeing it, like I'm saying, I think you're also seeing it at the local level. But the 10, 15 names that you have in the under 21, that's like, boom, you're going to see those guys everywhere now. It's going to be like this tournament, we're going to look back like, oh yeah, that was where it all happened, And the cool thing about the Olympiad, right, is it's not this kind of stodgy round robin things where only the good people get to play, right? Everybody gets to play, right?
Yeah, actually, on that topic, we should hit that as well. There's some people being upset that countries are sending teams with comparatively very, very weak players, and it's kind of opened up this debate about, it's like whether the Olympiad should be only for like super strong, serious players, or whether everyone gets to send a team. For me, I just want to clarify, like, I think in general, the spirit of the Olympiad is that everyone plays. So I don't think the strength of the players really matters. For me, the tricky thing is that it sounds like there's corruption going on, where some countries are sending weak players when they have like much stronger chess players available. And I don't know like what the reasons are, but it sounds like this was what Nigel Short was like I mean, he had this like whole thing that I don't really know a lot about, like the U.S. Virgin Islands, that he ended up
Oh,
like resigning
yeah.
FIDE for. I mean, it sounded like anyway. I don't know what's going on there, but
Yeah.
I feel
Don't go
like
down that rabbit hole. That's all I promise you.
I would say
Whatever you
this.
do, chat, whatever everybody listening, do not Google that. Do not Google that.
I would say just because Nigel is an unpleasant person doesn't mean he's wrong about every single thing he says. He's definitely wrong about some things, but you can't assume that he's wrong.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
you
I
guys
mean he's
know.
a rational person. He's not going to like resign from FIDE. You know, he had plenty of reasons to resign over like the war in Ukraine and stuff like that, but like, he like resigns over this like weird thing where yeah, ends up getting disciplined. Anyway,
Yeah.
so let me just say, like, on this topic, for me, my take, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's just like uh in general, if the country is sending, you know, their best players or whatever qualification they have, like as long as they have some kind of fair qualification for their Olympiad team, I don't care what their strength is. Like everyone gets to play. I mean, it's awesome that countries send teams. But yeah, if there's like corruption going on and then like the stronger players aren't even getting a chance or whatever, then yeah, that's a real bummer, and I hope that gets investigated.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe that's go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that's maybe a good moment to shift a little bit. And I wanted to say, we kind of touched on it briefly, but I want to say, while you guys were saying, oh, it's a bummer that Russia and China weren't there. Yes, it was a bummer, but I think for me, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but like there's a dawning gulf that's happening, right? Where there's just this massive split that's before our eyes, where China and Russia are going to be one thing, and then the rest of the world is going to be another thing. That Russia didn't play wasn't a huge surprise. That China didn't play, that was a big disappointment, because why? What's the pretext for them not playing? And it's a political thing, and it's like, oh, that's gross. Because now we're in a position where chess becomes very political, as it used to be, right? And then we don't get the chance to have a united world chess community, and we're kind of starting to feel Cold War-ish, right? Ooh, and then especially now with Nepo Ding on the horizon.
Yeah, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, it's just going to get worse. So anyways, that's just got one of the consequences of the just Nepo Ding being played is it's going to be played on the other side of that curtain, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to quickly agree with what Kostya said. I think that, you know, countries without, you know, GMs or without IMs or without whatever the level of play is in that country, they should absolutely be sent there. I mean, I definitely am sensitive to people traveling too much and the carbon footprint imprint and all that. But a chess Olympiad's a glorious, beautiful thing, and, you know, cultural exchange and people coming together in peace from every single possible country, I think is a very important and wonderful thing. So I absolutely think that, you know, every federation should be sending teams to this event. And of course, if there's some corruption in the process, well, I'm against corruption. That's obvious. Do you guys think that Russia or China would have done well at this tournament had they participated?
Of course they would have done well, man. By the way, think about young talents. Think about all those Chinese kids. Like they're just like the Indian kids. We don't even know who they are because they haven't had a chance to play for years, right? Mm-hmm. They haven't been outside the country for years. Those kids haven't. We just see in Ding, and then basically that's almost it. Those guys aren't even getting a chance to play. Huge deal.
Yeah, I think they would have. I think they would have done all right. I mean, I don't know. Actually, with Russia, it's like their Olympiad performances have gotten so disappointing. I actually was rooting for them in a couple Olympiads because they always like don't do well, and I'm like, come on, Russia, like one time, just like live up. You know, I just want to I want to see Kramnik dominate. I want to see Grischuk dominate. You know,
they did badly as the favorites enough times that they became semi-underdogs, even with the number one seed, to the point where you wanted to see them as underdogs do well one time.
Yeah, I mean, I did see them as underdogs for Central Olympiad. Yeah, like they never do well. So like, and it has so much talent too. They got like 2750 on board 5. It's just like it's insane. Yeah, actually, okay. Well, I don't know if we had more to say on this topic.
I'll say one thing on that topic. I definitely don't think that they would have won the Olympiad ahead of the performance that we saw from Uzbekistan. So I want to put in perspective briefly for people the performance of Uzbekistan, because I think it may not be obvious, but Uzbekistan had 2 players perform over 2,800 and 2 more players perform over 2,750. Right? 2 players over 2,800, 2 over 2,750. That is miles and miles and miles away from the second place Armenia team, for example. Armenia had 2 players perform over 2,700, 1 player over 2,600, and their 4th best player performed in the 2,500s. So, like, what Uzbekistan did was not just win the tournament, but they crushed it on points scored and percentage. And if you look at the tie breaks, right, like they had the same match score of whatever, 19 out of 24 or something like that. Is that out of 22? 19 out of 22?
22, yeah.
But on points scored on boards, I think they scored about 4.5 points more. Which is massive, right? If you count like point by point how they were doing. So I think Russia or China would have done, about like the US or Moldova maybe. But Uzbekistan would have won this tournament against any team this particular week. Their average rating performance of their whole team is just outstanding,
Yeah, they're really on fire. And someone was asking like how it got to this point. I remember hearing years ago, like they were investing a lot of money into like youth programs and youth coaching. Of course, they had Sokolov as their trainer for this time around, maybe for a little while. But I think this has been something that's been, I mean, clearly been growing for years. And people have been circulating these photos. You can see the entire Uzbek team as like kids, like 5-6 years ago when they're all like little babies, like Noterbek and Sandarov. And it's clear like they've just been locked in, some high-end training facilities for the last several years, working 10 hours a day, blitzing all the time, just like studying nonstop. None of these kids have social media, by the way, which I find very interesting. You don't see like Noterbek like saying anything after a tournament. I think these are just like super soldiers that are about to start absolutely. I mean, we've already seen Noterbek, like he won the World Rapid Championship ahead of Magnus, which is insane. But yeah, it's just the beginning, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions you guys want to hit today?
Yeah, last topic, real quick. During the Olympiad, there's also the FIDE election, which every couple of years happens. And every couple of years, it's like, the winner is kind of known ahead of time. And lots of people are hoping for someone else, but it's just kind of known going into who's going to win.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a real bummer. And I don't know what to do about it. Other than just lament that this is our situation in the chess world.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, basically every national federation is corrupt, right? That's why the results are foregone conclusions in a way as they are, right? Because the results are sort of purchased. And the only way that the president could purchase the votes is if the people he's purchasing it from are corrupt as well, right? And this is something that also comes to my mind, Kostya, when you make any arguments about, well, this person had problems with their federation, so that was a reason to move. Well, dude, wherever you move to, you're going to have problems with that federation too, because they're all corrupt. It's like you flee the Cuban federation and end up with the Filipino one, or you flee that one, get to the German one. Why did Georg Meyer switch his federation? Because he was unhappy with the German federation, right?
Actually,
with the Armenian federation.
You're asking why
they're
Ronin
all bad.
Didn't switch to Germany. Yeah, he probably heard some stories from Neidich and Meyer and everyone else.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. I mean, I would say federations probably aren't all corrupt in the same exact ways, and some might take better care of their players than others.
No, but the odds are that 95+% of them are run by corrupt people.
That's fine. I can't really dispute that, one way or the other.
One way or the other, though, right? I mean, let's just say the problem with the FIDE election, whether we talk about the national federations being corrupt or not, I feel agnostic about it. But the process is set up for corruption in the sense that that the vote of some small country, US Virgin Islands or whatever, is worth the same as a huge country, right? Like India. So it's very easy then to buy up the small countries. And that's been going on for years. And that's why the process itself just feels so icky.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it goes even further because if I'm not mistaken, the way the election actually works is that there's a representative for each country, and then there's like a secret ballot. So you don't even see how each country voted; you just see the
Right.
final count. So
Yeah.
maybe a country thinks that they're voting for, I don't know, the quote moral candidate or whatever, and then the representative, whoever that may be, gets paid off or whatever. It's just like
Yeah.
it's just so much darkness about it.
You don't even know who the US Chess Federation voted for. So if you wanted to have some effect on how the US was going to vote in the next election, you actually have no way to affect it because you don't even like you could say anything you want to and they could say yeah, understood, I'll vote for that person, and they might not vote for them. So
And let's just say something obvious. So Dvorkovich wins again. The guy is an interesting guy. Like there are many people who I kind of trust their opinion saying he's okay. Of course, he has a past with Putin though. So it's really, really weird.
right.
Secondly, like maybe it's a good thing in that now we need somebody to bridge this gulf that's widening between China and Russia and the rest of the world, right? So maybe he's even in the right spot to at least have some kind of communication over a wall that I guess is building, right? Like, are we going to see Russian players playing in the round robins? I guess not. Are we going to see Chinese players playing in the round robin? Probably not so much, right? And so there's this whole thing that's happening that's really unfortunate that obviously is reflected in world events, but at least I don't know that. So that guy's in an interesting position. Well, wherever you want to say about it, that guy's in an interesting position.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I want to echo what you said. Like, there's lots of people in the chess world that like what he's done as president, as FIDE president. It's just obviously
Right.
his background is extremely questionable. Um, yeah, I mean, I hope it works out. I didn't have an issue with him when he was elected originally because it felt like
Right.
he does have a chess background. And it seemed like he might be able to do some good stuff. Now, of course, it's just super complicated. It seems very tricky. We might end up with Vishy Anand as FIDE president, which would be kind of, I'd be okay with that. I don't know. I don't know. Like, that seems. I would vote for Vishy if he just ran on his own. Um, but yeah, the thing about how like we have no way of affecting even who the federation votes for, I think it kind of rings true. It's all very strange, and it's hard to see how it will change. I think it just continue to mold and evolve. But
Yeah.
And one thing we should stress to people watching is we are just as clueless as everybody else out there. There's no clarity. Of course, like we normally, like we talk about something, we'll do a little bit of research on it. It's very hard to get any information on what happened at the election, and it was a crushing victory. That surprised me. But like, who voted for whom? How did it go down? Was there any kind of debate? Nothing. I don't know. It was all behind closed doors, man. I just have no idea.
yeah, I think
And
there
that's
was
the
a
way it
debate.
generally always is.
I think there actually was a debate with like Barysh Politz and Dvorkovich, and I think the other candidates as well.
Yep.
But yeah, it wasn't really, publicized much, and I don't even know if it affected anything. Like, I think the federations just view it kind of as like a business deal. They're just going to vote for the candidate that gives them the better deal.
Right.
They don't really, I don't know. Seems like they don't really care that much about what the candidates actually say or stand for or plan or anything like that. Just
Yeah.
bummer. But yeah, that's it. So until the next Olympiad, which I guess will be in 2 years, I think in Budapest actually is the next one.
Cool.
And then the next election, I guess, 4 years.
And there's
in
going to be one in
Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan, right? In 4 years?
2026.
Oh, can't wait to see them clean
Team
that one up.
Team 2, Uzbekistan. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. We'll see how much talent they have by then. Actually,
Their B team better start preparing.
Yeah, fascinating.
All right.
Okay, that will do it for Dojo Talks. Thanks everyone for listening. Catch you guys next time.